The courtroom buzzes with tension, every seat filled with spectators, reporters, and legal observers, all eager to witness the high-profile case unfolding before their eyes. The air is heavy, charged with anticipation as Detective Harris, a tall, broad-shouldered officer with graying hair and a cold, unyielding stare, takes the witness stand, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. To many in the courtroom, he looks like the picture of authority and order, but those who know his reputation understand the truth beneath the surface. Detective Harris has served the force for over 2 decades, but his name carries weight for reasons that go beyond his years of service. In hushed voices, people speak of his pattern of targeting black and brown communities, of his aggressive tactics, and the complaints that somehow always disappear before reaching the public eye. Today, he testifies against a young black man accused of robbery, a case that at first glance seems open and shut. But the judge presiding over the trial is no ordinary judge, and this will be no ordinary day in court. At the center of it all sits Judge Melanie Carter, the first black woman to hold this prestigious position in the district. She is known for her razor-sharp intellect and unshakable commitment to justice. Her robes drape over her frame as she watches from the bench, her expression calm, composed, but beneath that calm is a storm brewing. Her dark eyes never waver as she listens to Harris speak, taking in every word and every subtle sign of prejudice lurking beneath the surface of his testimony. Detective Harris speaks confidently, his voice deep and authoritative. He describes the night of the arrest, painting a picture of the defendant as a dangerous criminal. He claims the young man was aggressive, non-compliant, and a clear threat to public safety. His words are polished and practiced, but Judge Carter notices the way he avoids specifics, how he glosses over key moments, and when he glances toward the defendant, there is something else in his eyes, something colder, something dangerous. The defense attorney rises to cross-examine Harris, a sharp-eyed man who has built his career fighting against systemic injustice. His questions are pointed, cutting through the polished veneer of the detective's testimony like a knife through paper. Detective Harris, why was your body camera turned off during the most crucial moments of the arrest? The lawyer asks, his voice steady, unwavering. Harris smirks, an arrogant curl of his lips as he leans back in the witness chair. It malfunctioned, these things happen, he says with a shrug, as if the answer is simple, but Judge Carter is not satisfied. Her voice cuts through the room like a blade. Detective Harris, in your 20 years on the force, how often has your body camera malfunctioned during an arrest? Her tone is calm, but there is an unmistakable edge to it, the kind that demands an honest answer. For the first time, a flicker of discomfort flashes across his face. He shifts in his seat, just once, but Judge Carter catches it. Before he can answer, she leans forward slightly. Her presence, commanding the entire room, falls silent, waiting on his reply. Rarely, he admits through gritted teeth, his earlier arrogance starting to crack around the edges. Judge Carter nods slowly, letting the weight of that admission settle over the courtroom. The gallery murmurs softly, a ripple of unease spreading through the crowd, but Harris' irritation is building. His jaw clenches and his knuckles whiten as he grips the edges of the witness stand. He does not like being questioned, does not like the feeling that control is slipping away from him. As the cross-examination continues, the defense peels away at his testimony, exposing contradiction after contradiction. The story Harris has crafted starts to unravel, but it is when the defense attorney pulls out a piece of evidence that the entire courtroom shifts. A grainy security camera recording from across the street capturing the moment of the arrest in brutal detail, and what it shows is nothing like the story Harris told under oath. The young man is calm, his hands raised, but Harris slams him to the ground hard, and the audio captures something else too, a slur muttered low, but clear enough to send shockwaves through the room. A collective gasp echoes. Judge Carter's face remains unreadable, but inside something sharp and cold twists, because this is not just another case, this is about power and how far some people will go to hold on to it. And she knows that Harris is about to learn a lesson he will never forget. The air in the courtroom grows heavier after the footage plays. The grainy black and white video loops one last time, freezing on the image of Detective Harris pinning the young man to the ground, his knee pressing into his back. The audio crackles, But the slur he mutters is unmistakable. The entire courtroom is stunned. The defense attorney stands tall, his face calm. But there is a fire behind his eyes as he turns toward the jury, letting the image linger in their minds. The silence stretches thick, unyielding. But the tension is broken when Judge Melanie Carter speaks, her voice even yet sharp. Detective Harris, she says with deliberate slowness, do you deny that the voice on this recording is yours? Harris stiffens, his jaw tightens, and for the first time since he took the stand, his mask of calm authority slips ever so slightly. He hesitates just a second too long. The air around him grows hot, oppressive, and he knows every eye in the room is on him. He finally answers, his tone defiant, defensive. I don't recall saying that. He lies, his voice flat, but the crack in his composure is there, and Judge Carter sees it clear as day. Her dark eyes lock onto his like twin daggers, and for a fleeting moment there is an unmistakable flash of anger behind her calm facade. The defense attorney does not let up, pressing him harder and harder, demanding to know why his report makes no mention of the slur or why the body camera was mysteriously off during the most critical moments. Harris tries to maintain his composure, tries to stick to his script, but with every answer he gives, the walls close in around him tighter and tighter. The evidence is no longer on his side, and worse for him, Judge Carter is no longer simply listening. She is dissecting him. Every word, every shift, every flicker of emotion is being scrutinized under her unwavering gaze. Judge Carter leans back in her chair, but the power in the room belongs entirely to her. She tilts her head slightly, and when she speaks, her voice is calm. But there is something beneath it, something that makes the hair on the back of Harris's neck stand up. Detective Harris, you have been a police officer for more than 2 decades, she says slowly, methodically. During that time, you have testified under oath countless times. Is that correct? He nods stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. And in all those years, she continues, never once has your equipment malfunctioned during an arrest like this one until now. How do you explain that? For a moment he says nothing. His face is red, his hands clenching and unclenching as the weight of her words hang heavy in the air. The courtroom is completely still. No one dares move, no one dares speak. He finally answers, his voice tight-clipped. Things break. Sometimes it happens, nothing unusual. But his words sound hollow even to himself, and Judge Carter knows it. She lets the silence that follows stretch, letting the discomfort crawl under his skin, letting the jury sit with the truth that his excuses are starting to unravel. The defense attorney stands ready to push further, but Judge Carter lifts a hand, signaling him to pause. She turns her attention back to Harris. Her voice lowers, but somehow grows even sharper. Detective Harris, do you believe that the rules of this courtroom apply to you as they do to everyone else? She asks, and her words cut through him like a knife. Harris's lips press into a thin line. He knows there is no right answer to that question, not one that will save him, and yet his pride, his arrogance refuses to let him back down. I follow the law. He snaps, his tone brittle, and for the first time a faint smile touches the corner of Judge Carter's mouth. The gallery watches wide-eyed, breathless. They can feel the tide shifting. The man who once held all the power now finds himself trapped under the weight of his own lies. Judge Carter's voice rings out again, clear, precise. Let me be very clear, she says, pausing to make sure the room is hanging on her. Every word in this courtroom. No one is above the law, and I will not tolerate anyone who believes otherwise. Her words echo in the air, a quiet but undeniable warning, and Detective Harris knows without question that his time of unchecked power is coming to an end. The courtroom is thick with tension, every breath held, every eye fixed on Detective Harris, his face tight with anger, his hands clenched into fists. At his sides, the once confident and untouchable officer now looks like a man cornered, but instead of backing down, he does something no one expects. He leans forward, his voice dripping with venom, and glares directly at Judge Carter, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. With no attempt to hide his disdain, he speaks loud enough for everyone to hear. This is a witch hunt, Your Honor, he says coldly, and it is clear you are not capable of being objective in this case. A ripple of shock sweeps through the courtroom. Gasps echo from the gallery as Harris accuses Judge Carter of bias. But he does not stop there, his arrogance burning too bright to be contained. His words come faster, sharper, filled with an anger he can no longer control. "This is exactly why people like you should not be on the bench," he says, his voice trembling with rage. "You are too emotional, too invested. You want to play the hero, but you are nothing but a political puppet." The room freezes, a heavy silence falling over everything. All eyes turn to Judge Carter, waiting to see how she will respond. But her face remains unreadable, her hands steady as she grips the edge of the bench for a brief moment. No one moves, no one speaks, the weight of his words hanging in the air like poison. But inside her, something burns hot and fierce. And she knows this moment is bigger than her, bigger than this case. This is about power and how far some people will go to protect it. Judge Carter rises slowly, her black robes sweeping around her as she stands. Her voice, when she speaks, is like steel, smooth and cold. "Detective Harris," she says calmly, her tone cutting through his arrogance like a knife, "I will remind you that you are under oath, and I expect you to conduct yourself with the professionalism befitting your position." Her words are sharp, deliberate, but Harris only doubles down, shaking his head, a cruel smile curling his lips. "You are trying to tear down everything good officers stand for," he spits, "and people like me are sick of it." For a moment, the courtroom is silent, so quiet that the faint hum of the fluorescent lights can be heard overhead. But then Judge Carter takes a single step forward, her eyes locked onto his, and there is no mistaking the power in her voice. When she speaks, you wear your badge like a shield, Detective Harris, but it does not protect you from the truth. She says, each word sharp and deliberate. "Your authority does not make you untouchable, and today the truth will speak louder than your arrogance." The gallery erupts, whispers spreading like wildfire, the audacity of his attack, the quiet, devastating power of her response. Harris tries to speak again, tries to regain control, but Judge Carter is not finished. She gestures to the defense attorney, who steps forward with a thick file of documents. "These," she explains, "are the official complaints filed against you over the last 15 years. She does not raise her voice, but the weight of her words strikes like a hammer. "Excessive force, racial profiling, falsified reports." The jury shifts uncomfortably, their faces tense as the truth begins to unravel. Harris's face drains of color, his composure slipping further with each passing second, the reality crashing down around him. Judge Carter's voice is steady, unyielding. "How many more innocent lives would you destroy if no one ever questioned your actions?" she asks. The question hangs heavy in the air as Harris opens his mouth to respond, but no words come out. For the first time since he walked into the courtroom, he is speechless, powerless, and exposed. The courtroom doors swing open suddenly, a court officer rushing in with new evidence, fresh from an internal investigation, revealing tampered reports and missing footage, tying Harris to multiple questionable arrests, the final blow to his credibility. Judge Carter takes her seat, again her eyes never leaving his, as she delivers her final words. "No one is above the law, Detective Harris, and today you are learning that lesson firsthand." The gavel strikes, the sound echoing through the courtroom, sealing his fate. The sound of the gavel still echoes through the courtroom, but no one moves, no one speaks. All eyes remain fixed on Detective Harris, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tightly it looks like it might shatter. But the damage is already done. The walls he has built around himself are crumbling, and everyone in the room can feel it. Judge Carter sits tall and composed, her face calm, but there is a fire burning behind her eyes, a fire that no amount of arrogance can extinguish. She knows what happens next is not just about this case, it is about the message it sends to every person who believes they are above the law. Detective Harris shifts in his seat, his muscles tense, his knuckles white as his fists curl at his sides. The defense attorney steps forward, his voice smooth but sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to enter these new findings into evidence. These reports reveal a disturbing pattern of misconduct tied directly to Detective Harris, including tampered evidence and the suppression of key witness statements." Judge Carter gives a small nod, her expression unreadable, but the weight of the moment is crushing. Harris's breathing grows heavier, his arrogance slipping away, replaced by something else, fear. The courtroom murmurs swell, the press in the back scrambling to capture every detail. Flashes of cameras illuminate Harris's face, every flicker of panic visible to the world. But Judge Carter remains steady, unshaken, her voice cutting through the noise like thunder. "Detective Harris, I have reviewed the evidence, and the facts paint a clear picture of abuse of power and a disregard for the truth. Your position does not grant you immunity from the consequences of your actions, and I will ensure those consequences are delivered swiftly. The words land with the force of a hammer, and for the first time, Harris visibly flinches. His pride, however, refuses to let him fall. Quietly, his lips curled into a sneer, and without warning, he speaks, his voice louder, harsher than before. This is a circus, he snaps, his anger boiling over. You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone, but I have given my life to this job. I protect people, while you sit in that chair acting like you understand what it means to be out there. His words drip with venom. But Judge Carter does not react, does not blink. Instead, she leans forward, her voice dropping lower, but somehow growing even more powerful. Protecting people does not give you the right to violate their humanity, she says, her words precise, each one striking like a blade. Your badge is not a free pass to destroy lives, to erase the truth, to bend justice to your will. And today in this courtroom, you are being held accountable. That is not humiliation, Detective Harris. That is justice. Her voice does not rise, but the room feels electrified. The gallery hangs on every syllable. As the power dynamic shifts completely, the once invincible officer, now exposed and trembling beneath the weight of his own corruption. Harris's hands tremble slightly, but he bites back his rage, his shoulders heaving with barely controlled fury. But he does not speak again. Perhaps he knows that nothing he says can undo what has already been revealed. Perhaps he realizes that the woman before him will not back down. Not now, not ever. Judge Carter turns her attention back to the defense attorney. Is there anything further, counselor? The attorney shakes his head. No, Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. Judge Carter lifts her gavel again, her voice steady as stone. This court will not turn a blind eye to injustice, and this case will serve as a reminder to all that no one, no matter their position, is above the law. Her words cut through the air, final and absolute. The gavel falls again, a sound that seems to mark the end of more than just a trial, but the end of an era of unchecked power. Harris slumps back into his seat, his once towering ego now reduced to rubble, and the entire courtroom knows that nothing will ever be the same again. The courtroom hums with tension as Judge Carter's gavel falls, but the echoes of her words linger heavy and unyielding. Detective Harris remains in the witness stand, his face pale, his jaw locked in a clenched fury. The arrogance that once radiated from him now replaced by a flicker of something he has never allowed himself to feel, fear. He glances toward the jury, and for the first time he realizes they are no longer on his side, their faces tight, their eyes cold, every shred of credibility he once held slipping away like sand through his fingers. Judge Carter keeps her gaze fixed on him, calm, unwavering, the power in her voice still echoing through the room. But beneath that calm, she knows this battle is far from over. She has faced men like Harris before, men who believe their badges make them untouchable, and she knows they do not fall quietly or without a fight. Harris shifts in his seat, his anger barely contained, his hands curling into fists, as if the force of his rage alone could shatter the walls closing in around him. But the evidence is too strong, the truth too loud, and for once he cannot silence it. The defense attorney stands again, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Your Honor, given the weight of this new evidence, we formally request an independent investigation into Detective Harris's conduct during this case and others like it. Judge Carter nods slowly, her expression thoughtful. But beneath the surface, there is no hesitation. This is bigger than one man, bigger than one trial. It is about the very foundation of justice in her courtroom, and she will not allow it to crack, not under his arrogance, not under anyone's. Detective Harris, you are hereby placed under formal review, pending the outcome of this investigation, she says, her voice firm and final. Until then, your testimony in this case is deemed compromised and cannot be relied upon as credible. The words strike like a hammer blow, wiping away any last vestige of his authority in this room. The gallery murmurs louder now. Reporters scribble furiously, their cameras flashing, capturing the exact moment his empire of lies begins to crumble. Harris's lips curl back in a snarl, and then the mask shatters. This is a joke, he snaps, his voice raw with fury. You think you can destroy my career, Because of one bad arrest, his words come fast and sharp, poisoned by his desperation. You are nothing but a puppet for the system. Judge Carter, you want to tear down everything people like me have built because you can't handle the truth of the streets. His voice rises with every word, his composure slipping through his fingers. But Judge Carter does not flinch, does not blink. Her silence is more powerful than any outburst he could unleash. When she finally speaks, her voice is quiet, but so sharp it cuts through the noise like a knife. You speak of truth, Detective Harris. She says, her words slow, deliberate. But the truth is this: you have abused your power, you have twisted justice to serve yourself, and today the truth has found you. The gallery holds its breath, her words drinking with an authority no amount of rage can shake. She does not raise her voice, she does not need to, because the weight of truth is heavy enough to crush every lie he has ever told. Harris's face burns with rage, his chest heaves, but he says nothing else because deep down he knows he has already lost, and Judge Carter knows it too. She leans back in her chair, her expression calm, but her voice carries the full weight of the law in this courtroom. No one is above the law, not you, not anyone, and I will ensure that justice is served without fear, without favor, and without apology. Her words seethe his fate, each one striking harder than the last, until there is nothing left for him to cling to but the bitter taste of his own downfall. For the first time in his career, Detective Harris is powerless, trapped by the truth he tried so hard to bury, and as Judge Carter lowers her gavel one last time, the message is clear: his reign of unchecked power is over, and nothing will ever be the same again. The courtroom remains thick with tension as Judge Carter's gavel falls again, a sound that feels like the final blow against Detective Harris's crumbling authority. But the battle is not over, not yet. Harris's face is a mask of fury, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turn white. The once confident and untouchable officer now looks like a man desperate to hold on to whatever power he has left, but that power is slipping away faster than he can grasp it, and everyone in the room can see it. Judge Carter's eyes never leave him, steady and unwavering, as the echoes of her words settle over the courtroom. Her voice carries a weight that cannot be ignored, a weight that presses down on Harris harder with each passing second. Detective Harris, she says, her tone firm but calm, you have made it clear that you believe yourself above accountability. But let me assure you that this court does not bend to arrogance, and it will not shield those who abuse the power entrusted to them. Her words land like hammer blows, each one striking deeper than the last. Harris shifts in his seat, his jaw tight, his entire body tense, as if he is struggling to contain the rage boiling inside him. He glances toward the jury, and what he sees only deepens his fury. Their faces are cold, their eyes hard. There is no sympathy there, no belief in his carefully crafted image of the loyal, dedicated officer. That image has been shattered beyond repair, and there is nothing he can do to fix it. But still he refuses to accept the truth, refuses to acknowledge that his time of unchecked authority is over. The defense attorney steps forward again, his voice sharp and unyielding. Your Honor, the evidence presented today is not just troubling, it reveals a systematic pattern of abuse and deceit at the hands of Detective Harris. We request that this court immediately refer this matter to the State Attorney General's office for further investigation. Judge Carter gives a small nod, her expression unreadable, but inside she knows that this is the right step, the necessary step. This case is no longer just about one man, it is about the very integrity of the justice system itself. Very well, she says, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. This court will formally recommend an independent investigation into Detective Harris's conduct, and until that investigation is concluded, Detective Harris, you are hereby suspended from active duty pending review. The words hit like a sledgehammer, wiping away whatever illusion of power Harris still held. His face turns red with anger, his fists trembling at his sides. But for once he cannot speak, cannot argue, because the truth is too clear, too undeniable, and no amount of rage can change that. The gallery erupts in whispers, the sound of reporters typing furiously filling the room, flashes from cameras capturing every flicker of emotion on Harris's face. But Judge Carter remains calm, her gaze steady, as she watches him crumble piece by piece. Detective Harris, she says, her voice softer now, but no less powerful, you have worn your badge as a symbol of authority, But today you are learning that authority without integrity is nothing more than an illusion, and this court will not be a party to that illusion. Her words hang heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. Harris tries to hold on to his anger, tries to muster the defiance that has carried him through years of unchecked power, but it is slipping away too fast, and the weight of his actions is becoming too much to bear. For the first time, he looks small, diminished, a man stripped of the authority he once wielded so carelessly, and as Judge Carter's words settle over the room, the truth becomes inescapable. His time is over, and nothing can change that now. Judge Carter lifts her gavel once more, her voice final and absolute. Let this be a reminder to all who enter this courtroom that justice is not a privilege reserved for the powerful, it is a right owed to every person who stands before the law. Her gavel falls again, the sound echoing through the courtroom, sealing Harris's fate as the doors to his once untouchable power slam shut forever. As the final gavel strikes, the room remains suspended in silence, the weight of Judge Carter's decision still hanging in the air. Detective Harris's fate sealed by the truth he could no longer avoid. The gallery stirs restlessly, the whispers growing louder as reporters scramble to capture every moment of this historic scene. The once powerful officer, now reduced to a mere shadow of the man he once was, he sits in his chair, his face contorted with anger and humiliation, his hands still clenched into fists at his sides. But the reality has set in, and no amount of rage can change the fact that he has been defeated. Judge Carter watches him with an unwavering gaze, her expression unreadable, but behind those eyes there is a quiet satisfaction, knowing that in this moment justice has been served. The room shifts slightly as the tension begins to dissipate, but the truth remains stark and undeniable. Detective Harris is no longer in control of this situation. The power he once held has been stripped away, and nothing he can say or do will change the course of events. Harris's mind races as the finality of the situation sinks in. His thoughts swirl like a storm inside his head, but his body is frozen in place. He knows that he has already lost, but he cannot yet let go of the desire to fight, to defend himself, to hold on to the small shred of dignity he believes he has left. But it is futile. Judge Carter has made her decision, and the law will not bend to his pride. His attorney leans in and whispers something in his ear, but Harris' eyes are fixed on the floor, his mind numb to the words of reassurance the man is offering him. The weight of the charges against him feels like an anchor dragging him deeper and deeper into despair. His world has been upended, and the things he once took for granted, his power, his status, his career, are now slipping away with each passing second. He cannot outrun the truth. The courtroom doors swing open, and a court officer enters carrying a folder filled with additional documents. Harris' heart skips a beat as the officer approaches the bench, his mind racing with dread. As the officer hands the documents to Judge Carter without saying a word, Harris can feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, watching, waiting for the next move. Judge Carter takes the documents and scans them briefly, her brow furrowing slightly as she reads through the new information. Then she looks up at Harris and speaks, her voice calm but firm. Detective Harris, I have just received additional reports from the Internal Review Board. These documents outline further allegations of misconduct on your part, including multiple instances of racial profiling and excessive force in recent years. I want to be clear that this court will not allow these charges to go unnoticed or unaddressed. Harris's chest tightens as he hears the words. The accusations that had remained buried are now surfacing, and there is nowhere left to hide. He opens his mouth to speak, but his voice falters. He cannot find the words to defend himself, to explain away the growing list of offenses that are now piling up against him. His body goes rigid as the realization hits him like a blow. He is finished. Judge Carter continues, her voice steady, unwavering. These reports will be entered into the official record and will be sent to the appropriate authorities for further investigation. You are no longer in control of this situation, Detective Harris, and there will be consequences for your actions, consequences that will extend far beyond this courtroom. The words hang in the air, each one punctuating the final nail in his coffin. The gallery is alive with a mix of gasps and murmurs as the truth unfolds before them. Reporters quickly adjust their cameras, and prepare to report the developments. The once untouchable officer now finds himself at the mercy of the law. He once thought he could manipulate at will. His arrogance, his sense of invincibility, has been shattered, and the cold reality of his situation is sinking in. Harris looks up now, his face pale, his eyes hollow with the knowledge that his life has been irrevocably changed. The career he had built with so much pride is now nothing more than a pile of ashes. The walls around him that he had built so carefully are crumbling piece by piece, and there is no escape left. The only thing left for him now is to face the consequences of his actions and hope that the law will be as merciful as it has been swift. The atmosphere in the courtroom has shifted completely. What was once an arena of power and arrogance has now become a place of reckoning where truth has finally come to light. The tension is thick in the air, but there is no denying the sense of justice that now permeates the room. Detective Harris sits motionless, his face pale and drawn as he absorbs the weight of the final revelations. The evidence now stacked against him in a way he can no longer dismiss, no matter how much he wishes to retreat into his former sense of invulnerability. Judge Carter's gaze never leaves him, her eyes steady, her voice calm, but the authority in her words is unmistakable. This is not just about one man or one case, she reminds the court. This is about ensuring that the very principles of justice that everyone in this room has sworn to uphold remain intact. Harris might have thought he could escape the consequences of his actions, but the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface, and now there is no escaping it, no denying the undeniable. The defense attorney, who once seemed so confident, now stands rigid next to Harris, his earlier words of reassurance now a distant memory. Even he can sense the tide has turned, and there is nothing more he can do to salvage his client's fate. His head hangs low as he listens to Judge Carter's next words. Detective Harris, you will be placed under arrest effective immediately, she says, her voice unwavering, her hands clasped firmly before her as she looks directly at Harris. No more delays, no more avoidance. The time for accountability has come. The courtroom gasps at the finality of the decision. Harris shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his body tense as the reality of what is happening settles over him. He is no longer the officer in charge. He is no longer the one who holds power in this room. He is no longer the one whose word carries weight. Instead, he is just another man facing the full weight of the law he thought he could control. The court officer steps forward with the arrest warrant, and as he approaches Harris, the former detective's eyes flicker with a hint of defiance, still struggling to hold on to some shred of his former power. But it's too late. Harris stands reluctantly, his body stiff, as he turns toward the officer. The cold grip of the handcuffs wrapping around his wrists feels like the final symbol of everything he's lost: his identity, his career, his freedom. As the officer leads Harris out of the courtroom, the weight of the moment does not escape the onlookers, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something more profound: respect, perhaps because in this moment it is clear that no one is beyond reproach, not even the men who wear the badge. The gallery remains silent as the door closes behind him and Judge Carter rises from her seat, her presence commanding the entire room. Without uttering a single word, she has not only delivered justice, but reaffirmed the very principles that keep the system intact. Judge Carter's decision will have rippling consequences far beyond the walls of this courtroom. Harris' arrest will make headlines across the country. The investigation into his actions will reveal a network of corruption that extends further than anyone could have imagined, and the message will be loud and clear: no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law, and this courtroom will never be a place where justice is compromised. Outside the courtroom, reporters crowd around, hoping to catch a glimpse of Harris as he is escorted to a police vehicle, their cameras flashing as they capture every moment of his downfall. But inside the courtroom, it is a different story. People are already talking about what this trial represents: the courage of a judge who refused to allow power and privilege to overshadow the truth, the courage of a judge who stood up to a system that too often bends for those in positions of authority. Judge Carter knows that this is not the end of the journey for her or for the case, but as she watches the scene unfold, she allows herself a brief moment of quiet satisfaction. The system has worked today, and it is a victory not just for one person, but for everyone who believes in the promise of justice and accountability. The courthouse has become a hub of activity as the news of Detective Harris's arrest spreads like wildfire across the city. Reporters rush to file their stories with their cameras, clicking and flashing, trying to capture every angle of the fallout. The courtroom has become a focal point, not just for this trial, but for a larger narrative, a story of power, corruption, and the unwavering force of justice, even when it is most inconvenient. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere is markedly different. Now, the tension has shifted from anticipation to reflection. People are still processing what they have witnessed today. The bravery of Judge Carter, the unflinching commitment to justice in the face of overwhelming odds, her words have echoed through the minds of everyone, present a reminder that the law applies to all and that no one is immune to its reach. Judge Carter sits at her bench, her expression neutral as she reflects on the case she has just presided over. Her mind races back through the events of the trial and the complexities that led her to this decision. She knows that this case is only one small part of a much larger issue, and the work is far from over. There are still questions to be answered, there are still systemic issues to be addressed, but for now she can take a moment to acknowledge the gravity of the moment. She thinks about the bravery of the victims whose voices have been heard finally after so many years of silence. Their stories validated, their experiences acknowledged. She thinks about the other officers who have been watching this trial with a mixture of fear and hope, wondering if this will be a turning point for them, wondering if they too can find the courage to confront the issues that plague their own departments. Judge Carter knows that this case is a step forward, but it is only the beginning. Outside the courtroom, the public is still buzzing with the news. Many are discussing the implications of Harris's arrest, the implications for the police department, and for the broader justice system. There are calls for greater transparency and accountability within law enforcement. There are calls for reforms and changes that would ensure something like this never happens again. People are beginning to speak out in ways they never have before, standing up for the principles that Judge Carter so steadfastly defended during this trial. As the day wears on, the courtroom begins to empty, but the weight of what has happened lingers in the air. Harris is no longer in the picture, but the ripples of his downfall continue to spread. There are still families whose lives have been affected by his actions. There are still colleagues who must face the consequences of their own silence and complicity. But today, those voices have been heard. Today, the truth has come to light, and for once, the law has not bent to the will of power. Judge Carter stands up from her bench and begins to walk slowly toward the back of the courtroom, her steps measured, her expression calm. But beneath it all, she is aware of the significance of what has transpired today. She knows that this case will be talked about for years to come. It will be remembered as a turning point in the fight for justice and accountability. And for her, it is a reminder of the responsibility she bears every time she steps into this room. As she exits the courtroom and makes her way down the hallway, she is approached by several of her colleagues who offer words of praise for her handling of the case. They express admiration for her courage and her commitment to upholding the law in the face of such intense opposition. But Judge Carter simply nods and thanks them, her thoughts already turning to the next challenge, the next case, the next fight. She knows that this victory is fleeting, that there will always be more work to be done, but for now she allows herself a small moment of satisfaction. Back in the courtroom, the empty seats serve as a stark reminder that this chapter is now closed, but the echoes of the trial still linger. The message is clear and unambiguous. No one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge, and the fight for justice continues. And as long as there are people like Judge Carter who are willing to stand up for what is right, there is hope that change can still come in even the darkest of times. The gavel may have fallen, but the reverberations of this moment will be felt for years to come.